I've also been sharing the deluxe book as well. There is a deluxe version.
Where are you sharing this deluxe book?
I've been putting in the chat. Like I said, I'm slinging books over here. I'm trying to help out with the books. You know, because honestly, looking at some of those pieces is like, that could go on a wall. That could go on a wall. That could go on a wall.
What were they saying in the chat, by the way? I'd just like to...
They're super impressed with all the details that have been coming through with the work that they've been doing there. And I think it's really cool to be able to see them collaborate. And it really, like I said before, I think it makes the game, even if they want to continue the franchise and do another one and do another one, this team, obviously you all can see, is very close. They're very much working off each other, and then they know the stories of all the characters and everything else.
You keep mentioning the details. I think it's fair to say that the details are the highest level that we've seen in years, and I think people are really finding ways to push it. It's really fascinating stuff to watch. And it looks like there is...
They're just getting adjusted.
They're just getting adjusted here off to my right. And are you excited? That one dude really kind of did look like me, didn't it? It could look like me.
Did.
If I continue down this...
There was a lot of Louis, a couple possibilities.
If I continue down this trajectory, it could look very much like me. I'm still youthful, though. I mean,
so look who's joined us here.
Wow. Taking it on here. Andrew, am I saying your last name correctly, Aritza?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Thank you so much for correcting me if I'm wrong, but I'm glad I was right. Ha! And we still have Della Longfish here.
You're saying that one right, too?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's important. And we're also going to welcome to the stage now for the first time today, Josiah Scholten.
Hello.
Guys, thank you so much for being here. Again, if you're just tuning in now, we're with members of the God of War team, Sony Santa Monica, so graciously here to spend their time with us. And off to our stage left is Angela Rico, who is... very gracious in her last...
left us as well.
I'm coming to that too. I was going to say she was very gracious with that last minute tip. That's the one thing to keep in mind is the tips. I'll hand it over to you guys. Rafael has gone back to do his thing in Brazil, but on to you guys for the second part of our Sony Santa Monica presentation. Go ahead.
Right on. Yeah, we'll get right into it, and we're looking at some more characters in the cast, and we will start off with some of the work from Josiah and Andrew, and go into some details of the making.
Kramer here.
So this was another character, Angerboda. Again, this was nice because we actually got to pull from mythology for this character. One of the things, too, I think that we look at when we're designing a character is, I think when you think of coming to work on a game that deals in so much fantasy, like a God of War title, it's the big monsters, the big creatures, the huge fantasy. The other side of that, though, is we are designing costumes and trying to get the subtle details in a character that has something that's more historical-based or designed with inside the silhouette and getting a little bit of that nuance and subtlety to still make an impactful design when you take away things like the silhouette change and all those elements within a character. But let's jump right into the models.
Yeah. So when I see a character like that, I see a lot of bells and whistles and pieces, and I like to mentally go through a checklist and break it up, how I'm going to tackle a complex thing like that, and so and keep a couple things in mind. So yeah, I usually try to focus on, readjust here. I usually try to focus on where the most detail is, and so in this example, like usually focus on the face and the torso, and really nail that down before moving too far along. And also thinking about where can I reuse certain pieces around the whole character and what kind of motifs there are. So in this case, she's got a form-fitting outfit, so I want to keep that in mind when I'm not getting too crazy with big armors and stuff like that. And then also the snake motif that we worked into the design. So from her arm to her medallions to the brooches, all that kind of has that working. So on the next slide. So yeah, in the face, we like to spend a lot of time. And in this case, we actually started from an actress scan of the voice actress, which was super cool and very helpful. But we still always like to modify and adjust things to fit the concept and fit the final in-game look we're going for. So it's not just like a one-to-one scan and then you're done. We still have quite a bit of work to do. And especially when sculpting faces, I'd like to point out it's super helpful to look at it at really drastic angles, because there's some forms that look great when you're looking head on, but then the second you rotate, you're like, oh, it's a little weird, or like look at a very harsh top-down angle to get the cheeks and the mouth feeling good.
I think that's also that attention to detail that works, because this is, again, something that's not scary or frightening, but add a little beauty and elegance, and that subtlety that you get in every inch of that is good.
Yeah, and so we wanted to, especially on the face, because that's obviously a lot of the character, is keeping that elegance and that energy there, even in a neutral expression. So super important. And then on the hair also, we usually do a workflow where we block it in, which we've talked about in ZBrush, and then kind of go through the process of getting outsourcing and other teams to help build that hair, and then do a final polish pass on it.
Yeah, the hair's got a lot of comments going on right now.
The hair's phenomenal.
The hair's like, look at that hair.
Man,
Yeah.
my hair looks like that.
So you block it out in ZBrush, and then
Jeez.
Yeah, do a bunch of tubes in ZBrush and like
Yeah.
some Dynamesh to get the idea going, and then rebuild it in the low poly, and then do a final pass. Sometimes using ZBrush even to polygroup and move around the cards themselves, because that can be easy sometimes.
so that's all cards still.
This is like essentially a couple tubes and with cards kind of stuck into the tube.
Right.
So a couple layered tubes to get the effect, and then some cards on top of that. So yeah.
Yeah, and that collaboration, even in something like this, is still there too, like you said.
Looking good.
Outsourcing and internal,
Yeah.
kind of.
Absolutely. And then for some things like the cloth, it's important that we put a lot of work in the high res most of the time, just to kind of prove that it's going to look good in the game. So things like the cloth tilers, I'll always put on there on a layer or something to get the idea going. And then it's always important to add a little extra detail and juice where you like kind of rip up some threads or like have a little variation so it doesn't look too static.
And you did a really good job on that too. Like I think sometimes we walk the balance of a costume feeling too fashion forward, but I think that level of detail and wear that we kind of set up with the historical detail in the style guide is super evident here.
Yeah, a lot of people are asking if you guys are actually putting the details sculpturally in all the clothes and everything else.
So the answer is yes, a lot of the time, and then we might take it back out when we do texturing or
Yeah.
kind of like tone it down, and then use tricks like tilers and you know, smart materials and stuff to get it back in.
Are you hand sculpting the cloth, or is it you doing marvelous?
It's pretty much all hand sculpted. Actually, all hand sculpted. Yeah. So
There you
I
go,
tend to work pretty traditionally, where I actually model it in like a low
Yeah.
poly plane,
Yeah.
couple layers, and then sub-div it up, and then start adding in that detail. So
Nice.
it's kind of a little slow process, but it works. So.
Slow and steady, apparently. wins the
It
race.
looks
10.
good, so you're doing it.
Another high five between Paul Gabriel. That's a 10.
And then on the shoes, same example. I like
Yeah.
they're very kind of intricate and overlapping forms of the leather at the bottom. So again, I went in and actually modeled it so it worked how I wanted it, where there's overlaps exactly how I want it, so I don't have to, you know, fiddle around trying to get it to work.
Let me ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
What do you like? Where do you get reference for those things? Because
Oh man, Della, you did the concept for this, huh?
Yeah, so we went back and like Ralph said with the historical details, we really looked at how shoes were made and worn. So we found a lot of stuff pre-Roman or like even like pure cultures of the Norse at the time and historically, and to see how they made shoes and bring it into it. And that's always the coolest thing for us, is seeing something that's completely different than what we're wearing these days. And you know, that attention to detail pops out, and even though you may not see all of it, we want you to be left with the feeling that everything has that kind of sense to it. And we think it stands out as a team, and then the result in the model, I think,
oh, it looks
kind
great.
of
It's very
validates that.
contemporary as well. I'd wear it.
Not a shock.
Not a shock at all. Kidding? I'll go back and look at it one
Free
more
pair
time.
comes with the art book.
I got the art book on
I
pre-order.
think you guys found another cosplayer over here.
Holy smoke.
So obviously, we got to get this thing in the game at some point. So this is the final in-game model, and like I said before, we kind of tone down and tone up some of the parts of the high res to help get the texturing going. And yeah, there's actually a lot of tweaks after the fact, right? You get the model, and then it inevitably gets a little flatter and a little less form, so you got to go back in and pop it back out. So after all the bakes and everything are done, it's good to do a pass and kind of accentuate certain areas.
And even evaluating these in the environments with the color
Yeah,
palette.
absolutely. So like in her example, she's in a very orange and warm environment most of the time. So we noticed that early on, like, hey, we should have a cool color palette to help her really pop out, because she's also pretty quick. So
Yeah, I think the initial color palette, since she was a giant, was more yellow, and while it looked good in the concept, it would disappear in the environment. So you can see where the team brought the blues to complement and bring that forward.
I think the color choice is really working there.
yeah,
It's
absolutely.
Really
And then yeah, the hair, like I said before, it took a lot of work to get finessed into place, and there were quite a few people who worked on that. So shout outs to Angela and the outsourcing
Shout
team
out.
also.
And then we had a new class of character, which was a cave dweller. This was a little bit different than some of the other characters. These are some sketches by Stephen Oakley. It's interesting dealing with a character that doesn't have the one-to-one relationship to the mythology. So Stephen ended up doing a wide range of explorations on this character to really make sure that it felt right within the cast of the other characters.
that'll
and-
keep you up at night, yeah.
Again, there's a lot more in the book if you want to take a look there when that comes out. But then this was handed over to Andrew.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really enjoy working with the VizDev department is just
we always have this conversation. It's like a very synergic workflow that we have going on, and working with my idol, Stephen Oakley, was definitely an amazing experience. So shout outs to him. How do we approach creating a creature like this? So I think, as we have mentioned during the presentation, one of the things that we do from the beginning is create a very basic model, and we put that guy into the engine as soon as we can. We are trying to find what silhouettes are going to work, what colors. It's maybe too early for that, but we are trying to make sure that what we are creating in the VizDev is actually going to make sense in the gameplay. And on top of that, you get a chance to sort of like see animation, show it to the other teams, and they can kind of grab from what you are working on. So that's extremely important. So working on these guys, of course, we had this extremely huge catalog of drawings and little concepts and doodles and all this type of stuff that Steven was making on the side, and we started like trying to translate that into a model that actually felt cohesive, and starting to research real life references to enhance that detail. And some of the ideas that you can see on this slide, for example, is that we started like thinking and understanding what the design team was doing, the animations, how they were looking, and we started like wrapping our heads on how we make sense of the abilities that these guys have. For example, you see the hands on the claws on these guys. They tend to climb to walls and kind of sneak up behind you and attack you. So a lot of that is, again, kind of grabbing and referencing not only from stuff from the outside, finding creatures and finding animals that you can use and bring to the concept, but it's also like trying to understand what the other teams are doing. And I think we can keep going with this one. And a lot of this comes from understanding, and this is a very highlight that I have here in my notes, is that understanding what the other teams are doing. And that conversation doesn't have to be straightforward, or it can just be you sneaking on what they're doing and kind of grabbing from what's happening in the other departments. So when you see the environments, you can use that as reference to put some details in your scope, kind of bring some of that dirt, some of that, like I said, biological representation of the capability of these characters. So
yeah, because I know too you were pulling a lot of references from, you talked about frogs.
Yeah, exactly. That's another thing that we do a lot. This character is supposed to be like a vermin that is invading many of the realms. So one of the things that we started looking into was not just grabbing from reptiles and amphibious life. We started like going into rats, for example, and you can see some of that on this character. And you can see a little bit of a lich type of approach, and you see all these teeth inside his mouth, and even on the eyes of this character, you see a little of a golfer, kind of like a rat looking eye, and we end up making it whiter and not necessarily black because we were trying to make this character pop.
That's one thing I think you did really well too, is you took all those influences, but none of them dominated too. Like you get the feeling of all those kind of characters in there without it just feeling like a frog.
Yeah, it was definitely like a long back and forth with Raph and with Steven to sort of like dial down things and push others. So we end up with a character that looks pretty much like nothing else really, but is grabbing references from.
And I think that's part that the team works really well with too, is designing stuff that doesn't exist. You can't just go to reference for this, but you still want it to feel believable. And it's not for everyone. Like it's stepping into that unknown. It comes with its own challenges, but the team is always great under the leadership of Eric Valdez too, is like, that excites them. Let's go see what we can kind of make out of this.
That's why I like art books. I'm an art book collector.
Are you really?
Yeah.
This guy letting the secret out of the bag.
It's great that we get to kind of share this here, but the nice thing about the art book too is we've gone into, and Dark Horse really broke down our thoughts and approaches to that, because I think we're a fan too of just what went into designing all this.
Yeah, they make great products, by the way.
I like art books because I'm like, what am I going to search online? I'm stuck. I don't know where to go with this character.
That's what you're searching on Google. I'm searching.
No, I'm saying I pull a book off. I can cycle through and get some inspiration from other artists. I'm like, that's a good idea, and go.
No,
I like it.
That's why we're saying some of the stuff under the hood on how we approach this stuff, because every project similar has a.
Yeah, and what Andrew's talking, I totally see the eyes. I immediately went to him. That was awesome. Yeah.
You know what? I would be remiss too. What else you can do is read books.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, read more
I prefer
books.
pictures.
I'm just.
So talking about a little bit of a struggle, I remember working on these characters and sort of like trying to find what their skin detail should look like. And I work a lot with Raph. We were kind of like bouncing ideas and working on these guys. I remember sending the model to Raph. Raph did something, he sent it back to me. We like kind of started that exploration and trying to bring these characters' skin to life. We started pretty much combining reptile and amphibious life, but the thing with amphibious, for example, is that if you try to find a scan data for these guys, you're gonna realize that they are pretty smooth. All of these ideas that we have in our mind is a combination of like hue values and little small wrinkles and the fluids, this disgusting stuff that they probably have, and we have to exaggerate a lot of that. We grab also from the concept that Steven did, and from there we were just pretty much like kind of developing a very specific look for these guys.
Yeah, and I think also just with the cohesiveness of the characters in the world, stuff with the skin I know that you did is kind of like Tier, where it pulled from the concept work that Luke Berliner and his team did. Same thing when we first see these in Svartalheim, we looked at the reference for the environments that they had created and brought a little bit so they felt like they had that consistency across them.
Absolutely, and again, if I remember correctly, for these guys, we were doing a sculpture for the most part. I think we rarely went back and used a photograph that we transformed into an alpha and we brought into ZBrush to use it around. For the most part, we were just grabbing what we were sculpting, like using the tools that we have at our disposal and kind of trying to save time. But for the most part, it was a very like hand work for the most part. Yeah.
A lot of handwork, I'm hearing.
Yeah, definitely. And going to the textures, I remember these guys being a little bit more greenish towards the yellowish, and it goes back to, I think, what the team has been talking about during today is that we are trying to make art look beautiful and badass, but at the same time, we are making a game. We are trying to work and focus our efforts towards making a smooth experience for the players. So that's something that we are pretty much kind of like balancing all the way throughout the process, and I feel like it's extremely like special in the work that we do at Santa Monica is that we are trying to work together to accomplish that goal. It's not just animations, it's not just cues in the UI to prompt players to see what the character is gonna do. It's also like in our hands to contribute to that idea.
But even in the texture work here, you can see the highest contrast is in the eyes and the mouth, the things that are becoming coming at you first. We want to really make sure like that is the primary.
Yeah, and that belly color just brings you right
yeah,
up.
all that goes into consideration.
And to that point, talking about the belly color, that's something that, for example, like we talk a lot, and I work with Eric in many of these characters to sort of like find a difference between the back and the front of these characters. Seems like a very simple and kind of silly thing that you will not think. Maybe it's just a design choice, but it's also we are thinking about the gameplay. Mm-hmm. How do we know that the character is coming towards you or is going away? That is like what
good point. Yeah,
the thought process behind this type of decisions. And of course, we are artists. We are trying to make these technical and gameplay decisions look amazing, and that's kind of like the challenge that we always have to deal with.
Yeah, always in the back of our head is the idea. If it just looks pretty but doesn't play well or work for it's not a success. So that's something.
Look, I'm in the game too.
Oh, stop. Here we go. What a guy. What a guy. I can't believe he said it.
And of course, from all these amazing catalog of ideas that Steven created and grabbing from the environments, I think we had the need to create a family, a trio of these creatures to sort of like make a set of different abilities and sort of like different types of attacks.
Yeah, this is a faction like the other one. Like they had the variety, but still felt like they kind of all existed.
Exactly, and we were going for like something that, this guy is yellowish, this guy is greenish, but the shape and kind of like the hints that we have, like Della was saying, we are trying to highlight certain areas depending on what attack this guy is capable of doing. I think on this guy, for example, we have an emissive mask that pops out of like nowhere, that kind of hinting that this guy is about to attack. So there are a lot of stuff that we probably are not showing necessarily here because it would take too long, but there are a lot of these different decisions that we are making throughout the process. And again, these are the Grims.
Yeah, again, another new faction that looks fantastic in the game, and we always kind of want to make sure they stand out.
It's really fun to work on that, yeah.
Oh, they're standing out all right. really
awesome.
good.
So obviously Brock and Sindri were a fan favorite and a personal favorite of myself too, but they were really just the tip of the iceberg. We knew that in this game early on that we'd be going to Svartalheim, which is the realm of the Huldra. So we'd see more of the Huldra there. So this is a character called Durlin. You can see some sketches from Stephen Oakley and the kind of 2D collaboration that Raph did here.
Great drawing.
Steven's awesome.
Yeah,
He's so
really
good.
great drawing.
Yeah, and Steven is fantastic. A mile a minute. It's like
Yeah.
300 drawings a day kind of thing. And in
300 drawings a day.
in a project that just has like stepping in the unknown, it's just a wealth of ideas that Steven brings. But we wanted to make a dwarf in Durlin that could hold his own visually and have that impact as a character from the writing side that Brock and Sindri did. He's completely different than them, so we wanted something different, but still kind of opens up the world on what we had just kind of touched on with Brock and Sindri.
Yeah, so I got a chance to work on this guy, which was awesome, because like you said, Steven does 300 drawings in a meeting, let alone a day. So yeah, this guy was awesome. I like to break it down, like I said, so he's got a lot of pieces, and I loved the design because each thing kind of contributed to a story. So like from the scroll, he's a bookkeeper, and so like the scrolls to the ink pots to the pen, even his friend Diener, who's the little squid thing you saw. You know, all of it contributes to like what he does as a job, and also kind of backstory on who he is as a person. So yeah, so unlike some of the other ones, he wasn't started from a scan. It was like a contribution of Raph doing a block out for the concept sketch that you saw in 3D, and then I took that and did the final like high poly one. So for some stuff like the pores and things like that, using just like a base scan we have of just a random person was super helpful just to get those little tertiary details in there. But then I went in and like basically resculpted all the primary and secondary forms to match what we want. And another important thing is like, you know, like you saw in the concept, he's got a little bit of an expression, and it's important that we have expression in the face, like with the wrinkles and the shape of everything, but not too much, because we are going to actually add that later. So we got to keep it kind of neutral, which was a good balance of like making sure he's interesting even without doing anything, you know, as a face. So, and adding all the scars and the wrinkles was super fun. So yeah, on him, I mean, he's got a lot of pieces too, but it's important to note that like the stitching and all the details are kind of large because he's so small, right? So like, you see him next to Thor or somebody, he's like, he's a tiny little guy. So you got to make sure that those details are large to read, not only for baking, but just like as a gameplay thing, like we've been harping on the whole time, you know? You got to keep that in mind. So for the jacket also, that was super fun because like I said, I do stuff just subdiv modeling mostly and then add all those details after the fact. So I actually UV'd that whole strip that has the pattern on it so I could swap it out if we want to with different concepts or different designs, which is always useful, especially for like the leather straps and things like that. So
It's looking awesome.
yeah, and then there's a shot of some of his accessories and things like that. So
You know, the materials too.
yeah,
You get
the
the
materials.
variety and the.
Yeah, for sure. Breaking up between like the velvet jacket and the leather sleeves, and then the cotton and leather combo is really important. So again, we like to put all that detail in the high res file just to get a sense of what it's going to be like in the game.
Yeah, that's just another great example of you're designing something that is kind of smaller silhouette and what you're doing, and that detail inside can really still get that visual impact as something as big as a dragon.
Someone
Yeah.
says they see a little Danny DeVito in this.
They want to see little Danny DeVito. Here it's always sunny somewhere. Come on. Sunny in Burbank right now,
for it.
exponentially sunny with the shine that these guys have brought with them. Look at the little
And then-
details on the back, that
Okay,
little
go back.
backpack there. Look at that, look at that.
Yeah, it's important, like Andrew was saying, like,
Wow.
you know, characters aren't only seen from the front, so focusing on every single angle. So even hiding in little, you know, things that people might not even notice, like the key in the pouch and
Yeah,
maybe what's in the
just saw
pouch,
that.
and things like that.
It always gives a sense of history that we like to do, and our fans will pick up on all those details, so it never goes unnoticed, which is
It
really.
does look like Danny DeVito.
We, yeah, we do love to keep everything story focused and like have all those little details in there because we're assuming someone at some point
Right.
will catch
It's
on.
for the fans.
Yeah, it's for the fans.
For the fans, yeah.
That's exactly why I make buttons in ZBrush. It's for the fans.
And
do it
another
for the
thing
fans.
for texturing, I feel like it's important to keep track of these characters have a lot of patterns and a lot of details, right? So you want to focus on like reusing what the patterns are to like not only make the character more consistent, but to save yourself some time. So even things like the shoulder straps, I reused on the boots to give it a little more extra excitement all over the character. So yeah.
Hey, it looks cool.
Yeah. And that's how he turned out. So yeah, it was fun also with, again, color palettes. You gotta have the mix of those greens and the reds to help him stand out in his shop that he's in, and also compared to the character he's with all the time, which is the little squid. So that squid's more of the purple, cooler tones. So we like to mix and match like that.
And then obviously within a God of War cast, we have a wide range of characters.